The reigning queen diva changes with each age. Beyoncé was born in the 2000s. We had Madonna in the 90s. During the 1970s and 1980s, the invincible Barbara Mandrell was the rightful monarch. Barbara had the kind of charisma that boosted the visibility of any performance she was a part of, whether it was acting, singing, or dancing. She was so popular that her variety show ruled television for 2 years. And the purpose wasn't merely to amuse. Dominance was hers. Let's talk about some major praise. 7 American Music Awards, 2 Grammys, 4 ACMs, 4 CMAs, 9 CMT Awards, and 9 People's Choice Awards. And we must not overlook the fact that she became the first artist to win the CMAs back-to-back. Nevertheless, 1984 was a watershed year. She began to see the end of her career after a terrible tragedy rocked her life. So, why did one of the biggest names in country music decide to take a break from the limelight? After that, what did Barbara do? If you want to know why Barbara Mandrell said an unexpected goodbye and how she has been enjoying her life since then, you'll have to watch this film. Mary Ellen and Herbie Mandrell were pleasantly surprised to receive Barbara as a Christmas present. She was the firstborn out of 3 sisters when she came into this world in Houston, Texas on Christmas Day, 1948. Barbara was brought up in a musical household. With a mother who taught music and a father who worked as a police officer, her home was always bustling with music and song. After relocating to Corpus Christi, Barbara's aptitude became more apparent. Even before entering 1st grade, she had an ear for harmony and began playing the accordion. As early as Barbara's 6th birthday, her family uprooted and relocated to Oceanside, California, where her father established a music business. She was completely attentive, getting into band at school and picking up the saxophone. However, it was the steel guitar that truly changed everything. Because Barbara had become so proficient after taking lessons from a relative, her father accompanied her to a Chicago music trade fair. She stunned country music icon Joe Mathis, who promptly booked her for a Las Vegas performance. Suddenly, Barbara, who was still a child when this happened, was performing steel in front of large audiences. She quickly became a regular on Town Hall Party and began touring with legendary artists like Patsy Cline and Johnny Cash. Barbara began playing steel guitar, her mother the piano, and her father the lead vocals in the Mandrell family band when she was 14 years old. As they went around military bases, they played a wide variety of music, from Beatles songs to country hits. But singing wasn't Barbara's only passion. She also won Miss Oceanside, California in 1965 and was active in extracurriculars. Barbara wed the band's drummer, Ken Dudney, after she graduated in 1967 and then opted to step away from performing. She was born to be on stage, though. Barbara visited her parents in Nashville when Ken was away serving in the Navy, but she felt the need to perform herself rather than sit in the crowd. Not long after her dad took over as her manager, she was back on stage at Printer's Alley in Nashville. In 1969, Columbia Records signed her after her incredible skill stunned everyone. Barbara Mandrell's meteoric rise to country music stardom began at that moment. Having said that, Barbara's early career took an unusual turn. She was more than simply a country singer, she also sang soul and R&B songs, which added variety to her repertoire. In 1969, her breakout single was a rendition of I've Been Loving You Too Long to Stop Now by Otis Redding, which reached #1 on Billboard's country charts. Playing Around with Love, penned by Billy Sherrill, was her single that year that peaked at #20. She continued the momentum by covering popular songs such as Do Right Woman, Do Right Man by Aretha Franklin and Treat Him Right by Roy Heads. Treat Him Right, Mandrell's debut album, was released in 1971. It featured her hits as well as cover versions of songs by singers such as Joe South and Ivory Joe Hunter. In the same year, she was honored with the top new female vocalist award by the Academy of Country Music and was invited to perform at the prestigious Grand Ole Opry. In 1972, her debut solo single, Tonight My Baby's Coming Home, peaked at #10. After that, in 1972, she released Show Me, which also did well on the charts. Several duets she recorded with country singer David Houston at this period were equally popular with listeners. They released a duet album titled A Perfect Match in 1974 and remained on the charts together until their song reached #10 after closing time. The critics were captivated by Mandrell's ability to combine country and soul. The grit in her voice and the passion in her performance made her songs stand out. Columbia Records seemed unsure of how to mold her sound at times, despite her obvious aptitude. She seems to blend in with the label's other artists on occasion with her music. It prevented her from fully realizing who she was. In 1973, her single, The Midnight Oil, which dealt with a woman's infidelity, became her breakout single. The album also soared to the top of the charts when the song reached the top 10. With 1974's This Time I Almost Made It, she maintained her country soul vibe. Mandrell still had self-doubt and felt unworthy of praise despite her achievements, yet, her father's words of encouragement helped her push through. In 1975, she decided she needed a new beginning and quit Columbia Records to pursue other chances. When Barbara Mandrell signed with ABC Records in 1975, an imprint that would ultimately join with MCA Records, her career took off. Mandrell began incorporating pop elements into her songs with the help of producer Tom Collins, which allowed her to reach a wider audience. Standing Room Only, her debut single for the label, reached number 5 on the country charts and established the tone for her subsequent hits. Midnight Angel and That's What Friends Are For were subsequent hits. Collins wisely infused Mandrell's repertoire with R&B, expanding her musical horizons. In 1977, her 6th and 7th albums were notable due to the success of her covers of Married But Not to Each Other by Denise LaSalle and Woman to Woman by Shirley Brown, which caused a stir on the country charts in the US and Canada. Mandrell had discovered her sound by the late 1970s, when her songs on infidelity, heartbreak, and love struck a chord with listeners. Her 1978 single, Sleeping Single in a Double Bed, was her first to reach number 1. That same year, she had yet another blockbuster hit with her cover of Luther Ingram's If Loving You Is Wrong I Don't Want to Be, which not only topped the country charts but also made it into the pop and adult contemporary playlists. Both moods and Just for the Record, 2 of her most successful albums, reached number 10 on Billboard. In addition to being a talented musician, Mandrell was also an accomplished showgirl. Choreography, wardrobe changes, and solos showcasing her multi-instrumental prowess were all part of her elaborate concerts. A television program titled The Lady Is a Champ was even produced from one of these performances. She was a blazing star in 1979, when she won Female Vocalist of the Year from the Country Music Association. Even more so in the early 80s. She became famous from her work with her siblings as co-hosts of the NBC variety show Barbara Mandrell and the Mandrell Sisters, as well as receiving the Canadian Music Awards Entertainer of the Year honors in 1980 and 1981. I Was Country When Country Wasn't Cool, Crackers, and The Best of Strangers were more songs that contributed to her ongoing chart success. Even in 1981, her debut live album achieved gold status, demonstrating her enduring popularity, including smash singles like Till You're Gone and One of a Kind Pair of Fools among their number 1 successes. She also earned her first Grammy for her gospel album, He Set My Life to Music. Things started to fall apart for her on September 11, 1984, after she had already achieved success with duets with Lee Greenwood, such as To Me, in 1984. Tragically, her dream became a nightmare when her car was involved in a head-on collision with another vehicle caused by the other driver crossing the center line. Barbara suffered life-threatening injuries, and the other motorist lost their sad life in the collision. All the fame, glamour, and success she had strived for suddenly seemed far away and pointless. Barbara and her family bore the brunt of the grief, suffering, and subsequent uncertainty. There was a tremendous physical toll. Barbara had to recuperate for months after suffering multiple injuries, including a fractured leg, a concussion, and others. Something that would have been completely out of the question for her a year ago, she was compelled to do because of her job. However, overcoming the bodily anguish was only part of the challenge. Knowing someone had died as a result of the accident was incredibly painful for her emotionally. It made her doubt her own popularity and the precariousness of life. Even though her children were unharmed, they nevertheless experienced the traumatic effects of the incident, which exacerbated an already difficult position. Still, Barbara wasn't the kind to give in without a fight. She returned to the music industry, even though she needed over a year to physically heal, and she was stronger than before. Even so, she had changed greatly since the accident. Her views on fame, life, and the value of safety were all altered by the accident. It was a watershed moment that made her a staunch champion for the use of seatbelts. This was particularly true after she discovered that members of her own family had not always exercised the utmost caution. Even though she had recently become an advocate, the emotional and legal struggles persisted. Mark White's family became embroiled in a legal battle shortly after when Barbara and Ken Dudney chose to sue them for $10.3 million in damages. The choice to sue unsurprisingly caused some to wonder. Fans felt it was in poor taste, considering the tragedy that had transpired, to attack Barbara Mandrell and Ken Dudney. The lawsuit's motivations were far more nuanced than it appeared. They were attempting to profit from the circumstance. Getting the financial aid they needed to get back on their feet wasn't about making money out of a terrible tragedy. Not because they were enthusiastic about it, but because the insurance company was being uncooperative and they needed to get their money back. However, it was not how the general population perceived it. Barbara had been through a lot, and they felt bad for her, but they weren't sure if suing the family of the other driver was the right thing to do. It expanded into its own entity. This is a discussion of morality. While dealing with tragic events, determining what is justifiable, and determining the boundary between personal and commercial losses. Grief, responsibility, and the complex world of public image were now at the center of the story, rather than mere celebrity rumors. Barbara continued unabated in the face of criticism. After taking a public and personal beating, she ultimately refused to remain down. By the decade's conclusion, she had resumed her previous level of success, demonstrating that she could overcome any obstacle. With the signing of a new recording contract with EMI America in 1987, Barbara Mandrell was still very much involved. Although it didn't set any new marks, her debut album with them was nevertheless a major success, placing 24th on the Billboard country music charts. Even though her singles weren't as successful, critics appear to enjoy it. The other songs didn't do as well, although Child Support did manage to break the top 20, indicating that the country scene was beginning to alter around her. She still had more to offer, even though younger musicians playing classic country music were all the rage. She maintained a steady following base despite the changing tastes of the time by continuing to tour and be a major attraction at live concerts, particularly in the 1980s and 1990s. Another change came at the end of 1987 when she inked a deal with Capitol Records. An effective rendition of Ray Price's "I Wish I Could Fall in Love Today" was her debut song there, rising to the position of number 5 in the United States and Canada. Her 1988 album, "I'll Be Your Jukebox Tonight," had a more conventional country sound and was decently received, but it failed to achieve the kind of success she had hoped for. "My Train of Thought" and "Mirror Mirror" were her last singles to achieve significant success in the United States, but that didn't stop her from achieving a handful of top 20 hits. But Mandrell wasn't slacking off. Her 1990 album "No Nonsense" had a strange tie-in with No Nonsense Pantyhose, and her 1990 album "Morning Sun" was her other 1990 release. Although it failed to make a splash in the marketplace, Mandrell's music managed to linger, particularly among her devoted followers. In 1991, she released "Keys in the Mailbox," her last album with Capitol. The album wasn't a smashing success, but critics gave it good marks for its honest blend of modern and soulful country sounds. Mandrell remained true to herself despite the many shifts in the industry. Even though her popularity on the charts had declined, she remained a formidable force in the country music industry thanks to her constant live performances and television appearances, particularly at the Grand Ole Opry. 2 albums by Mandrell were released in 1994 via Direct Records. The first, "Acoustic Attitude," and the second, "It Works For Me," were promoted on television networks such as TNN. Although they didn't soar to the top of the charts, Barbara Mandrell's star was clearly not going anywhere. She was merely reimagining herself as an enduring icon of country music. We believed as much. Barbara Mandrell surprised everyone in 1997 with a surprising declaration. She announced her retirement from singing, recording, and traveling. She announced her decision to quit music and pursue acting professionally in an interview with Billboard. In October of that year, she had her final performance at the Grand Ole Opry House. And the event was shown as The Last Dance starring Barbara Mandrell and the Durites. After a long and successful career, her country music career came to an end with her public farewell performance. In a subsequent interview, Mandrell said that leaving the stage wasn't about her job per se, but rather her family. She wished she could be there for her son when he entered puberty and headed off to high school. She was ready for a change since she was about to turn 50, the age at which most country artists start to fade from the spotlight. She was so ready to move on from that period of her life that she sold all of her instruments as a symbolic gesture. Barring a few of tribute shows, Barbara Mandrell never performed a public song again. As a result, the country music industry quickly adapted to life without the reigning queen. Barbara completely embraced her second act as an actress once she stepped aside from her singing profession in 1997. Despite this, she had dabbled with acting in the past, appearing in TV movies like Burning Rage and appearing as a guest role on The Rockford Files. She didn't devote herself fully to acting until she retired from music. By signing with the Creative Artists Agency, Barbara was able to secure a string of prominent jobs. After leaving the music industry, one of her most successful roles was a recurring character that showcased her dramatic range on the soap opera Sunset Beach. In addition to her work on Baywatch, Dr. Quinn, Touched by an Angel, and Medicine Woman, she had parts in other acclaimed vintage TV series. By stepping away from the glamour of the country music stage and into the challenging parts of varied actors, Mandrell proved in these appearances that she wasn't scared to challenge herself. Her 1999 made-for-TV film The Wrong Girl, which aired on NBC, portrayed a mother coping with an excessive girlfriend. Mandrell demonstrated her ability to handle heavier material in this part, which was different and more emotionally dramatic than what fans were used to seeing from her. The 2000 television film Stolen from the Heart was her last film credit. Mandrell had already proven that her abilities went well beyond those of a country music performer by the time her acting career came to a close with this. Barbara Mandrell has been happily escaping the limelight for the past few years to concentrate on her family and personal life. She made the conscious decision to live life on her own terms, rather than a forced one, when she decided to withdraw entirely from performing, whether it was singing or acting. Her self-awareness in knowing when to gracefully retire is legendary, much like her career. Even without the fame, fortune, and #1 singles that Barbara Mandrell enjoyed throughout her life, her reputation shines through. She triumphantly exited the stage after having transformed herself and breaking new ground. Perhaps that is the true test of a legendary figure. Being aware of when to tie a knot. Rather than out of obligation, do it because you genuinely enjoy it.